Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Boss Up and Glow Up with Lexi Sample. I'm your host, and if you're new here, we talk about mental health, how to glow up, and how to be the best possible version of ourselves. We're all about glowing up here, okay? And I know it's hard sometimes. We fall into some unhealthy patterns and we struggle to get out of them sometimes. And we think about our potential, but we're not fully acting on it sometimes. And today's episode is going to be all about how to stop romanticizing your potential because you're just romanticizing it. You're not acting on it. So, we're going to dive deep into it. Okay, y'all. I want to talk to you about this because it sounds productive, but it's actually keeping you stuck. And romanticizing your potential is keeping you stuck. And I don't mean believing in yourself. I don't mean having a vision. I mean being emotionally attached to who you could be while not structurally becoming that person, because those are two very completely different things. And we see it all the time on social media, all these videos of people romanticizing things, but they're not actually doing those things. Yes, they're doing things for a video, but are they actually doing all those things in their everyday life? And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about not romanticizing it so much and acting on it, you know? And if we're being honest, I love the idea of who you're going to be more than you love the process of becoming that person. And I know that because I have done it. Okay, we need to slow this down a bit because there is a version of you that lives in your head. They're disciplined. They wake up early. They don't overthink text messages. They don't spiral emotionally. They save their money. They work out consistently. They study consistently. They don't entertain nonsense. They're calm. They're secure. They're built. And you imagine that person often. You think about how your life would look if you were that person. You feel inspired by that person. But here's the question I need you to sit with. And that's, are you building that person or are you just admiring that person? Because admiration can feel productive sometimes, and building will feel inconvenient. But that's the difference. We need to talk about the aesthetic trap. Let's be real, y'all. It is very easy to romanticize self improvement right now. Morning routines look clean, gym content looks empowering, studying looks aesthetic, working on yourself looks sexy. And we see these videos all the time. I see them all the time on my For You page too. And honestly, when I see them, I do get like motivated for a hot second to like do something where they're doing their everyday gym routine and it just looks so clean, so perfect, so aesthetic. And same with studying, look like it's cute and aesthetic, but we know studying is hard. We know going to the gym is hard. Doing all these things that build ourselves and build the best version of ourselves are hard. But the videos we see on social media that are aesthetically pleasing make it look so easy, so simple to do. You can curate the vibe of discipline without actually practicing discipline. You can download that habit tracker. You can talk about your reset. You can tell everyone you're in your discipline era. But if your daily behaviors are still inconsistent, nothing shift, nothing changed. And that's where I had to check myself because I love being seen as driven. I love the identity of being ambitious. Grad school, building a platform, working in a hospital, having these big goals, that identity feels good. But identity without repetition is just branding. And that stung a little when I realized it because I'm doing all these things. I'm in grad school, I work in a psych hospital, I'm building a social media platform. I'm doing so many things and it all looks good, but it is hard. It looks like it's aesthetically pleasing on social media. It looks easy on social media, but it's hard. We need to talk about why potential feels so good. Let's get into the psychology behind it because potential gives you dopamine without demanding proof. When you imagine your future self, your brain responds almost as if progress is actually happening. You feel productive thinking about it. You feel powerful planning it. You feel ambitious talking about it. But nothing changed yet. Nothing actually changed yet. Your nervous system hasn't adapted. Your habits haven't changed. Your identity hasn't been reinforced through action. You're just stimulating possibility. And possibility is addictive. It is so easy to get addictive to possibility. I was like that before. I would romanticize so many things. I vision board all the time and just looking at it, it just feels so addicting to have that mindset. But am I doing everything that I'm saying I'm going to do? You got to put yourself in check for a second because it doesn't require vulnerability. Execution does. Okay, now we need to kind of discuss the ego layer because this has ego behind it, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. If you never fully commit to something, you never fully fail. You can't fail at something if you were never committed in the first place. If you operate at a 70% effort, you always have protection. You can say things like, I could have done it, it just wasn't the right time, I wasn't really trying. And that narrative is what keeps your ego intact because trying fully means risking finding out where you actually stand. And some of you are more afraid of discovering your current level than you are actually staying stuck. And that's real because what if you give it your all and you're just average at first? What if you want to build a platform and you're posting consistently, but you're saying, oh, I'm not really putting effort into my post and you're not getting the views you want? You can say you're not trying. But what if you're posting consistently and growth is slow? What if you study harder and you still struggle? That forces humility. Humility is quiet. Potential is glamorous. So, most people typically cling to potential. We also have this gifted identity problem. And what I mean by that is if you grew up being labeled as smart or high potential, this hits you differently. When you're used to being naturally capable, effort feels threatening, you know? You know those people in school who would always be like, "Oh, I never study for a test, but always get a fucking perfect score." This is the type of person I'm talking about because struggling publicly contradicts your identity. So, instead of building mastery, you hover in conceptualization. You become the person with ideas, the person with plans, the person who could be incredible. But here is the shift. Being high potential at 16 is impressive. Being high potential at 30 without execution is avoidance. And that's not an insult, it's an observation. We see it all the time. Okay, I want to tell you something that I don't know if I ever mentioned before. There was a time when I genuinely loved being perceived as ambitious more than I loved being disciplined. And that is a hard to admit. It was a very hard pill to swallow because on paper, I'm doing a lot. I'm in grad school, I'm working in a psych hospital, I'm trying to build a platform. I have a lot of behind the scenes things going on that I haven't even mentioned, talking about long term goals. But from the outside, it looks like momentum. And I believed it was momentum. But if I'm being honest with y'all, I was in love with the identity. I loved when people say, oh my gosh, you're doing so much. I love when people say, you're going to go so far. I loved being seen as someone with potential. But here's what I wasn't consistent with, okay? I wasn't consistent with my sleep schedule. I wasn't consistent with my gym routine. I wasn't consistent with structured content planning. I started slacking on my content so fucking bad, guys. I wasn't consistent with deep focused study blocks. I was not studying like I should have been. I would have intense productive days, like very hyper focused, 4 a.m. wake up, gym, content, studying, planning my future days. And then I would burn the fuck out. And there would be days where I would just have to rot in bed because I was so emotionally burnt the fuck out because I would have a super hyper focused day, and then the next day it was like just slow crickets. Nothing was really going on. And instead of admitting I didn't have structure, I would tell myself, I just needed another reset. I need a new planner. This one's too full. Let's chuck this one. I need a new routine. I need another system. I need to keep restarting. And every restart felt so productive. Every reset felt like progress. But I wasn't building repetition. I was building cycles. And cycles feel like motion, but they don't create compounding results. The shift happened when I noticed something very uncomfortable. The people I admired who were actually disciplined, they weren't loud about it. They weren't constantly announcing their resets. They weren't emotionally attached to being seen as hardworking. They were just steady. They were just consistent. And I realized something that hit my ego a little bit because I liked being seen as someone with potential more than I liked being someone with structure. That's subtle, but it changes everything because potential gets applause, structure gets silence. And I had to sit with the fact that I was more motivated by the applause than the silence. That is real. When I stopped announcing things and just started quietly and just quietly tracking them, it got uncomfortable so fast, you guys. No one knew when I woke up early. No one knew when I was studying consistently. No one knew when I didn't feel like posting but did it anyway. No one knew when I picked up extra shifts just because. There was no immediate validation. It was just repetition. And repetition is humbling because repetition forces you to see your gaps. You can't hide an identity anymore. You have to confront these things. Am I actually consistent, or do I just talk about consistency? And once I started tracking my behaviors weekly instead of emotionally, everything changed so much. I realized I wasn't as disciplined as I thought. And instead of spiraling, I just simplified things. There are non negotiables per week, and I choose 3 of them. That's it, just 3: gym, post, one focused study block daily. No aesthetic overhaul, no dramatic declarations, just measurable behavior. And for the first time, I stopped feeling inspired and I started feeling stable. Stable feels so much different than motivated. Motivation is loud, stability is quiet. Motivation feels powerful, stability feels controlled, and controlled is sustainable. That was the moment I stopped romanticizing who I could be and started structuring who I was becoming. Not perfectly, though, but consistently enough that the identity shifted. I stopped saying, "Ugh, I'm so disciplined," and I started having proof that I actually was. And that shift did more for my confidence than any reset ever. Because confidence built on repetition is calm. Confidence built on potential is fragile. And I didn't realize how fragile mine was until I stopped feeding it with fantasy. Let's separate 2 versions of discipline, okay? We have fantasy discipline. They wake up early because they feel motivated. They eat clean because they feel aligned. They work out because they feel inspired. Structured discipline, they wake up early because it's scheduled. They eat clean because it's pre-decided. They work out because it's part of their standard. You are waiting for alignment. They built systems. Motivation fluctuates. Structure stabilizes. And this is the part that nobody glamorizes. Systems are boring. They're predictable. They don't give you a dopamine spike, but they do give you identity stability. And identity stability is what you actually want. Some of you mistake boredom with failure because you're so used to intensity, drama, high emotion, urgency. Consistency feels flat compared to that, but flat is sustainable. Boring habits build extraordinary results, and not because they're exciting, but because they are compound. And compounding is slow, it's subtle, which is why most people just give up when things aren't cinematic. They don't see an immediate payoff, so they return to fantasizing because fantasizing feels like movement. All right, we need to talk about tracking. If you don't measure it, you can exaggerate it. If you're not tracking your workouts, you can say you're consistent. If you don't track your spending, you can say you're saving. If you don't track content output, you can say you're building. Metrics remove illusion, and illusion protects comfort. So, a lot of you avoid using data because data is neutral. It doesn't care about your intentions, it reflects your repetition. And repetition is truth. So, what actually changes this? You stop asking how you feel. You start asking what your standard is. Standards eliminate daily negotiation. If your standard is maybe 3 workouts a week, you don't debate it every morning. You execute weekly. If your standard is 1 hour of study daily, you don't wait for inspiration. You just honor the commitment. Standards create identity. Identity creates confidence. And confidence reduces the need to fantasize because now you have evidence. And evidence is refreshing. One more thing, y'all. Stop announcing everything. When you declare your new era publicly, you get early validation. That validation satisfies your ego before the work even begins. Then, discipline feels less urgent. Move quietly. Let your consistency speak later. Not because it's trendy, but because silence reduces performance pressure, and performance pressure increases inconsistency. Quiet execution builds internal confidence, not external approval. Y'all, this is not about shaming yourself for having potential. Potential is beautiful, but potential without repetition is just imagination. And imagination is comfortable. Growth is uncomfortable. You don't need to be extraordinary overnight. You need to be consistent longer than you're comfortable. Stop romanticizing the person that you could be and start structuring the person you're becoming. Not dramatically, not loudly, just consistently. And that is the real glow up. I want to thank you so much, you guys, for tuning into today's episode of Boss Up and Glow Up. I hope this made you realize a little bit that you got to stop just romanticizing your potential and just stay consistent. Because a lot of us say we're going to do things and we're not actually doing them. We need to stop with that. We need to stay consistent. And I hope this made you realize if you're romanticizing your potential or if you're actually staying consistent. We don't need to make a huge announcement for everything that we're doing. We just need to do those things. Okay, thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Boss Up and Glow Up. I love you so, so, so much, and I hope you are glowing up with me.